Let's move on. It's no secret that ice is a serious problem in this country, and serious problems demand serious solutions, and that is something we should talk about. If you had to explain why taking drugs is a really bad idea in one oversimplified sentence, it'd go something like this. Just because it feels good doesn't mean it is good. But what if drug users aren't the only people making that mistake? What if all of us are? And especially, what if that's exactly the mistake we're making when we try to fight the ice crisis? Because there's a good argument that that is precisely what's happening. Here's the problem. We are officially the best country in the world to sell ice. More drug users are taking it, they're taking it more often, it's getting purer and it's getting more addictive. And so, not surprisingly, our addicts are willing to pay more than anywhere else in the world to get it. Why? Because, by all accounts, taking ice feels really good, right up to the point where it kills you. And the number of people it's killed has doubled in the past 5 years. So we're doing something. Remember this guy? In April this year, Tony Abbott launched a national ice task force to end what he quite rightly called the ice scourge.
As a citizen and as a parent, I am appalled at what is happening on our streets and in our homes.
The idea is simple. Law enforcement cracking down hard on drug users, $1 million for a national hotline to dob in a dealer, more police resources, tougher criminal penalties. Feels good, doesn't it? It made Tony Abbott look like a strong leader. It gave him some great slogans, but there was one little catch. It was never going to work. Even the guy running Tony's task force fundamentally disagreed with the idea that we can just arrest our way out of the problem.
We've had a really strong law enforcement approach, and it hasn't resolved the problem.
Years of evidence has shown that more arrests, longer jail terms and drug seizures simply won't fix this. If you don't believe me, believe the cops. Despite an 85% increase in detection of amphetamines and a 515% increase in the rate of seizures, the supply of ice to Australian users hasn't changed at all.
Despite arresting more offenders, seizing more proceeds of crime, the price of ice remains stable in Australia, and users say that it's still very easy to get.
The thing is, we've been here before. In the 90s, it was called heroin, and we actually got it right, or more specifically, John Howard did. Faced with increasing deaths, he called his response tough on drugs, but it wasn't just about force. It was actually smarter and more nuanced than that.
Get people in education, get people in health, and get police working together to get people off drugs.
It was community, it was health programs, it was schools, it was families. It wasn't just a police officer, and there's no police officer I knew who could possibly solve this problem alone.
But since Howard, we've taken a big step back, and that's why the Australian Strategic Policy Institute's report into our current drug policy, out today, pretty much tears us a new one.
If you expect to repeat the same processes over and over again and get a different result, you're fooling yourself.
The evidence says law enforcement on its own won't work. It can only work when it's combined with harm minimisation, including treatment and, crucially, access to rehab as soon as it's needed.
There seems to be a view out there that people don't want to get off drugs. They actually do want to get off drugs. I have a waiting list to get on the waiting list to get into a rehab of 100 beds.
Victoria has 200 beds right now for residential treatment, and they have a 4-month wait list. 4 months is almost a death sentence for a number of these people.
So why do governments so often ignore that evidence? Well, because putting users in hospital beds just doesn't give you the same buzz as chucking them in a slammer. No one gets elected being nice to drug users.
We need someone who's tough to be able to make the call and put money into recovery programs and treatment for people who need help.
We all know there's a problem, and it's a problem that affects us all, not just the drug users, but their brothers, their sisters, their mums, their friends, their neighbours, their workmates. You've heard those stories of the perfectly normal husband who becomes a serial thief, or the mother whose son is brutally murdered by an addict in a burglary gone wrong. We all feel that desire for tough action. But if we listen to the experts, it becomes pretty clear that this is a social problem. These crackdowns aren't aimed at ice users, they're aimed at voters. And we can't afford to let some war on drugs be our drug of choice, because the problem with all that is, just because it feels good doesn't mean it is good.